Hey, everybody. If you have ever thought to yourself, what on earth is going on with people these days in the workplace, and what on earth can I do about it? Boy, are you in for a treat with my conversation today. Hi, everybody. I am your host, Michelle Arntz with Nuggets with Sauce. And today I am over the moon pleased to have as my guest Alex Gifford, all the way from Australia. Hello, Alex. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. I mean, this is like time travel because actually what we're doing here right now is a completely different day for you than it is for me, which is really,
Yep. I'm
well,
15 hours ahead, just gone 9 in the morning.
I know.
Yeah, nice cloudy Australian morning, so the temperature's regulated, and I'm happy with that.
Wonderful. We were just saying too, it's springtime for you. It's autumn where I'm at. So we're catching all the bases on time zones and hemispheres and all kinds of things. But Alex, I am just thrilled to have you here on the show today. You and I have been connected. I was thinking about this probably the better part of 10 years now, I think we've known each other
Yeah,
through
yeah.
work. We used to work at the same company, all those kinds of things. And I really wanted you on the show for a while. And I'm so pleased that you're here. And we're going to dive into all kinds of great saucy nuggets. I know you and I are going to get very saucy on this conversation.
Oh, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I know. I know. I know what I know what you roll with, and I know what I roll with, and between the two of us, it's going to be crazy fun. But just before we dive into what we're really going to talk about today on the what's going on in everybody's head, and things kind of seem crazy here. I always, as you know, love to introduce my guests by asking them, not the job title thing, but what really fires you up, what's getting you passionate, what's giving you purpose, what gets you out of bed every day and makes you go, I want to make the work world a better place.
Well, I think it is actually just that. I want to make the world a better place. I've been through, over the years, a number of struggles myself. I'm actually currently starting up my own business because I'm between jobs because I walked out of my last one because
Yeah.
the culture there was absolutely toxic, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And that I think has really set me on a mission to just do what I can to make the work world a better place.
I love
It's all about the people. It's all about the culture.
that.
And with the business I'm running now, I go in and hopefully I fix that for you.
Yeah, I love that. We're definitely going to be talking about culture and toxicity. I'll get to that in just a sec. Now, I also love to ask about a recommended read, watch, or listen. And I know you're very fired up and you've got a great answer for that. So, what is your recommended read, watch, or
Yeah.
listen?
So my recommended read is actually a book called Ikigai, which is about finding your purpose, and it talks about the four quadrants of life: of what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're good at, and where they all intersect. That's your ikigai, and that's where you can go out and make a real difference to the world. So I actually read it for the first time last January, and then I read it again this year after I'd walked out of my role, and that's really has shaped my direction for this year, the business that I've started up,
Yeah.
and how I've combined two elements of my life that I love the most to hopefully be my future career.
I love that. I see. This is what I so appreciate about you, Alex, is your willingness and ability to connect those dots. Like you're such a connective thinker in that space. So
Yeah.
I love that recommendation. I will definitely be adding that to my reading list as well. So love that. So in the space of, the nuggets that we really want to, chomp on today, and I know
Yeah.
there's plenty of them, and we'll keep it to a regular. I'm sure we could talk for hours. We'll keep it to a regular sized
Yeah.
episode here for our audience. But you are a guy that I really admire and I really look at in this space of any number of things around, because your background is in HR and learning and development kinds of, again, you're like me, you're very much in that people part of the equation of business. And let's face it, everything about business is ultimately about people.
For people.
But you in particular have always struck me as somebody who is so genuine in like truly authentic and genuine in who you are and how you approach work. You're very thoughtful, you're very connective in what you understand. You're very holistic, I guess we could say,
Yeah.
in your approach to understanding things don't happen in a vacuum around here. And I've also really come to admire and appreciate your honesty and openness and transparency around, some of the struggles and challenges that not only have you seen other, dealing with
Yeah.
it from the level of like, I'm the professional in the organization who has to, help guide people through these things, but you
Mhm.
yourself talking about your experiences, being on the receiving end of some of that, dare I say, bullshit. and and so I'm looking forward to hearing more from you and having you share more about some of those experiences and those insights and things that,
Yeah.
and I know that's a big what, like that's not a nugget, that's an entire like chicken
That's,
bucket to dig into. But
yeah. Yeah.
where do you want to start there, Alex?
Well, I have actually just drafted an entire book on that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's for the future. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, well, I think what you were saying about the openness that I have, for me, people relationships are all about that connection, and you cannot have that connection without trust. And particularly, I would say from an HR manager perspective, you walk into a business and everybody looks at you as you're part of the leadership team, you're part of the executive team, and there is always going to be an automatic mistrust. It's you are here to hire and fire. You're going to follow the corporate machine.
You're with
For
them,
me,
not
that's
with us. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. For me, that's not what HR is about. HR, and I prefer to call it people and culture.
I like that.
HR is people. People aren't resources. They're part of the entire environment that drives what you do.
I mean, they're not
Um,
like trees that could be cut down or fish that could be caught in a net. Come on,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
commodities. Yeah.
yeah. So it's about creating the culture, and you create that via trust.
Yeah.
So for me, getting in and being vulnerable, letting people know that I'm human, letting people know that I've gone through the same experiences that they have, and I have an understanding of it. That's always been the driving force for how I've managed myself and my relationships, in the workplace. And it's that that's enabled me to, as I say, solve the problems that I have, put in the fixes that I have, and gain those, for want of a better word, nuggets of wisdom from people because they know they can trust me. If they come and talk to me about it, there's going to be genuine empathy and there's going to be a real desire to actually fix it. And I'm not one of these managers who will get into an organization and just go, it's about profit, it's about driving it forward, and I don't care who I sweep aside on the way.
Right, right. Which everybody just so loves. And like, of course we know it, right? Like we know the difference between the person who really, as the saying goes, walks the
Yeah,
walk, talks the talk and walks the walk versus those that are just basically paying lip service. And my take on it has always been, when you talk about culture, to me, it's like, are you talking compliance or are you talking culture?
yeah,
And what I'm kind of hearing you say, or where I'm interpreting some of what you're saying is, the HR thing is like compliance, and the culture thing is truly the culture thing and building the
yeah.
trust.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that culture will differ across various aspects of the organization as well. You walk into any organization and they'll have their culture statement that says we welcome people in here and we operate in this way and we do that. And I found, particularly because I've done quite a bit of work with international organizations where there's been, a head office in America or China, and then we've been a subsidiary here in Australia.
Yeah.
Culture varies massively across sites. It even varies across departments,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's important to understand all of that you cannot have because you've got the different personalities, of the people there. You can't have a one culture fits all. You have to vary it, and that's, I think, for me, that's where HR really comes into its own in an organization because we're the people who have to integrate those cultures. Well, we have to give advice on integrating those cultures. It's
Right,
actually down to the people within them to work with
right,
them. But
right. But you're
really,
leading the charge. You're leading the charge on that integration.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and it's not about, as I said, it's not about imposing a singular culture. It's about understanding all the different cultures and needs you have in the business, and then working out how do we get these to best work together to riff off each other. What are the synergies, and then in some places where do we rub up against each other, and need to
Yeah.
smooth things out.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I want to pause and I want to pause and I want to think about and I want to talk about this a little bit more, Alex, because I think I'm guessing that some people who are watching or listening to this are going like, well, wait a minute, back up. Because like the whole point of the company culture thing is we're all supposed to be part of this culture. The stuff that you were saying is on the wall and it's on the brochures and it's this and it's
yeah,
that. And what you've just shared, I think, is fascinating and probably on spec anyway to a lot of people, really counterintuitive. Right? Isn't the end game, the prevailing end game about company culture is we're all supposed to sing Kumbaya in the same
Yeah,
way. We're all supposed to fit that one prevailing, this is our culture.
yeah,
So I think I want to kind of dig in and unpack this a little bit further with you. I'm not in disagreement by any stretch. I'm
yeah,
excited. This is the kind of conversation I knew we'd have. But let's dig into that because you've just dropped a bucket of nuggets here to sit there and say, it's not this, of course, it's not this, well, it's not supposed to be the stuff on the wall. You can say whatever you want and throw it on the wall.
yeah,
Live, love, laugh.
yeah,
First of all, why do I have to be reminded of that? But okay. Somebody has to sell decorations. It's not just the static thing of sticking it on the wall for one thing. I
yeah,
mean, that can be a touchstone to it, but it can't end there. But I really want to unpack a little further around let's maybe start with the idea that there are subcultures or varied cultures even within the organization. Can you talk a little bit
yeah,
more about that and some of your experiences working through
yeah.
those things?
I think probably the easiest way to illustrate it is if you look at the differences between the type of people who will go into finance and the type of people who will go into HR. Um,
You mean
Now,
different?
finance is to me. I've not, I've never worked fully in it. I'm not a fan of that sort of the nitty gritty, the spreadsheets, and all of that.
Right.
But finance is quite black and white. You're either making profit or you're not. Things will add up or they won't. There aren't a lot of grey areas in finance, and a lot of people who go into it, that's how their brain works. That's how they operate.
Yep.
It's very precise.
Yep.
HR, on the other hand, because yes, you have the policies, the procedures, the rules, regulations, all of that. You're dealing with people, so there are a huge number of grey areas
Yeah.
in this. There's no different perception of stuff in finance. There's no, to use a phrase which you all understand, alternative facts in finance.
Numbers are
It's
numbers are numbers, right?
numbers are numbers. Whereas with people, they will perceive things differently, they will interpret things differently, they will take different meanings from communications. If you email them, that could mean, you could email them with a message or describe it to them verbally, and they'll take something completely different from it because it's emailed. Or if you CC it to somebody else, that will change the meaning of why you've done it. So there's variations in that human resources people have to deal with that finance people don't.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
more nuanced, a lot more open to
yeah,
interpretation because there's human factors. We can't just say
yeah,
you're right. It isn't a spreadsheet. It isn't, so to speak, black and white.
no.
And
So
so there's a
because
lot of
you've got
navigation there. Yeah.
Yeah. So because you've got such a different focus and such a different skill set needed to work in that department, you are going to be operating within a different kind of culture.
Mhm.
HR people I found in businesses, we have to promote work-life balance. We have to promote taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
Whereas, a lot of finance departments, and God bless them for this, put in ridiculous hours
Yeah.
and stay late to get stuff done, and it's heads down silent work a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Again, it's a completely different way of operating, and
Yeah.
then you've got to find a way to allow these two groups who operate and work so differently.
Mhm.
There are interactions between us. There have to be conversations.
Right.
We get data from them. We have to deal with the management practices of people in, for example, the finance department.
Yeah.
So that's the work of human resources, is how do we do this? How do we present our material in a way that these guys are going to get it and understand it and be able to work with it, but it doesn't upset their flow in their
Right.
area?
And getting the mutual understanding, and you could
Yeah,
extrapolate this across anything depending on your business, right? Like maybe the IT people are a little more in tune to a certain degree with what the finance people are because,
yeah,
similar kinds of things, and what do they value, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's one of those cultural or subcultural underpinnings. I mean, what's important? We measure what matters. And how
mm,
do we measure it matters. And so all these kinds of things are, bubbling in the background there. And how is that different from your marketing team or your salespeople are very different, Kat.
yeah, yeah.
Again.
And yeah, and every department they'll look at themselves and say, well, I'm the most important department in the, in the company. Finance will go, if you don't have me,
Right.
then you've got nobody working out where we're going and what we're doing. If you, with the sales team, it's just, well, if you don't have us, you're not selling your product. It's
If
not going to get
marketing
anywhere.
didn't tell them what to
Marketing go, hey, if we don't have our material sales, you can't get anything done.
right. Yeah.
And you flow through IT. If we don't do our stuff right, you're not going to be able to communicate,
Right.
and put things through.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then you have HR who, and I'll admit, I do it, says, well, we're the people who deal with your people, and it's your people who do everything. So
Yeah.
there's us.
Right.
you know but
Right.
it's navigating all of that,
Right.
and the responsibility for that does come down, a lot of the time, setting the ground rules for it, not actually doing it. And I
Right.
always want to emphasize this as well. Human resources doesn't do everything. We will give guidance on it. We will
Right.
set the ground rules. We'll put out the policies and procedures, but we can't go out and manage your staff for you. We can help you with it.
Yeah.
Human resources, we help organizations
Yeah.
get it right, but
Yeah.
it's actually down to the management within the organization to do the doing.
It's a little bit, dare I say, you know me, I love my metaphors and my analogies. Is it fair to say you're kind of HR, your role, and you've been in this role, is kind of like being the referee, right? Like everybody's got,
Yes.
got rules of the game. Everybody's got to know what the rules are. And HR to a greater or lesser degree is often the keeper of, the rules of conduct and the
Yeah.
rules of how we play. But HR is not going to go out in the field and play. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily the rule. It's like, to your point, it's the man, the managers of the different departments are like your team captains, if you will, and they've got all these players and they've got to know. And if somebody says like, I think that, I think that was a violation, or you crossed a line, or me sporty spice, like
Yeah.
whatever your rules were, right? On any given sport. But that of course is when everybody wants to raise their hand and go, for all the poo-pooing out there about HR, screw them, like whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, but you sure want them when somebody you want to call a foul and you want to make
Yeah.
somebody go to the penalty
Well,
box or whatever.
you're going to want us pretty
There.
much for everything. If you're setting up a company, you're going to need somebody who can write legally compliant, and actionable policies and procedures.
Right.
If you're going through, and these are just things that I've done, I've been involved in mergers, where I had to create the plan for merging two human resource departments.
Isn't that fun?
The labor. What were we going to need? Oh, it was terrific. With takeovers, it's provide all the information on the people. Who have you got? What do they do? How do they integrate? When a company's been sold, it's been the same thing. If there's a shutdown of a company, it's HR that's going to handle the legal side and quite often the conversations for your redundancies and how you move people on. If there's a reorganization, you'll have to get HR in. We quite often do the communications and things like this. Now, we may not initiate any of these things, and we human resources, people and culture rarely does, but you're going to need people and culture in there to organize it and put it through.
Yeah.
We do all of this because ultimately everything you do in a business comes down to how do you deal with your people.
Can't see that.
And
Like I'm thinking of, particularly as you're saying in the M&A space. I mean, I've been on both sides of that coin. And usually one of the biggest things that pulls everything off the rails there isn't the bank accounts or the office furniture or the fleet of vehicles or the warehouse full of stuff that you got. It's the human beings in the equation who sit there and say, I didn't sign up to be company B, I'm company A. I'm out of here, or I'm not happy, or I won't perform, or I don't know what to do with these people that I've been given.
yeah,
And too often in that space, what I've seen is HR sometimes is one of the last. You're right. HR isn't necessarily initiating the things, but HR tends to be one of the last things that anybody comes to and says, well, now that we've checked all these other boxes and we know all this other stuff, well, you guys, figure out the rest.
yeah,
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 it's more often than not in those spaces. It's the human beings that pull the integration or pull the situation off the rails.
yeah.
And then
And
it's
if
stars
the
left
people,
a shovel.
yeah, yeah, and if the CEO or the GM or whatever position they hold in the company hasn't got a good relationship, isn't trusted by the people in the business, then it doesn't matter how you present it, you're going to get resistance to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I see, in terms of the people and culture piece, you need to have that good relationship with your people right the way from the start. And you get that through honesty, openness,
Yeah.
accountability, and
Yeah.
most importantly, working with integrity. So that's always been my main drive working as a people and culture manager,
Yeah. Yeah.
is still that right the way throughout the whole organization.
Yeah. Oh, and it has to be. And again, I think this is where too often we struggle in our work environments. And, for those of you in the audience, it's like, sit back and reflect a little bit and say, how often have things been, the root of it, if you really sit back and think about it, was, to your point, maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe it was a mistrust issue, the sooner or later it's going to come down to a relationship or, something to do with other people.
Yeah,
Whether it's, perception is reality for most people, whether
absolutely.
right or wrong.
Absolutely.
Um, but I think that's such a super important thing. And so yeah, starting with that whole trust and building the relationships and getting people to understand. HR is it's a tough road to hoe because you really are in a squeeze point between what because the employees often think, well, you're just there for the leadership, the HR, the stake, whatever, the
Yeah,
company guy or the company gal. But really good HR practitioners like you are really truly also looking at the best interests of the people involved.
yeah.
Right?
Well, I've been in situations, for example, one of the places I worked at before, we had a union negotiation that went off the rails. There was an agitator in the workforce who was, you know, instilled quite a bit of fear in a lot of the people who were there. But we ended up, kind of with strike action and HR sitting in the middle. I had the union absolutely livid with me because they felt that I was just protecting the company and, wasn't looking after their people. I had the people in the union thinking that I was on the side of the company and was fighting against the union. And then we had everybody who wasn't involved in
Mhm.
the negotiation also thinking that, oh, HR is capitulating to the union. So I had three sides of the business going, you're all doing the wrong thing. Whereas what I was trying to do was, and was actually succeeding in doing, was maintaining that balance.
Yeah,
But everybody took a side. And that's the other thing in HR is you cannot take a side
yeah,
in things. You really have to try and avoid getting emotionally involved. It is about it's about the facts. What are the facts? What is logical? Taking account that other people will be emotional with it. I mean,
yeah.
that's another skill altogether to kind of bring into
Right.
this, and that's very much that grey area I talk about
Yeah.
because that's what produces a lot of kind of irrational behaviours in HR dealings,
Yeah.
which is a big difference again, I'd say, between things like IT. You can't dispute a line of code. Finance, you can't dispute how something adds up or where it should sit, in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But with HR, with the emotional, component of it, you're constantly trying to balance that, and that can put you at odds with everybody there.
Yeah.
But with that situation, again, with my experience, it was just so long as I maintained that consistent line, had the same message the whole way through, was seen to be dealing fairly and equally with both sides. That's what got us through that
Yeah.
situation successfully.
Yeah.
But it can be very draining and very hard at times.
Oh, for sure. And I wanted to ask you about that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, as you're explaining that, that fine line where, you've found yourself repeatedly in the no man's land, the middle zone between trying to make these things work, if you will. And you brought up the fact that, there's emotions.
Yeah,
If this isn't spreadsheets, this isn't code. Although even that, people can get very emotional behind their spreadsheets and their codes because sooner or later, we are all human. What are your thoughts around that? Because to me, it's like there's sort of a two-part thing here, and you tell me which one you want to unpack in the conversation first. But I think it's very valuable to talk about. There's the emotional piece of the people you're trying to serve and work with in your capacity in the company. Like everybody is we are emotional creatures. Like it or lump it, and you can deny it all you want, but at the end of the day, we are human beings are emotional and helping people navigate and manage their own emotions. And I'm thinking like in this space that we're in, and this isn't just me here in America or you there in Australia, it's like it's global. Like the
yeah,
mental health concerns, issues, challenges the HR and other leaders, even if you're not an HR leader, are facing right now in their workforces where we're kind of not okay. And we're struggling at times to, get a grip on regulating our emotions, reading or understanding the emotions of others, trying to mediate that, look at, I'm thinking about this from two perspectives. One, there's the challenge of being in that role of trying to, again, help navigate that for the staff and help the leadership in the organization either navigate that for themselves and their staffs, right? We're back to like, hey, you're the referee on the field there, and the team captain's having some issues with a player who is, trying to punch people or
Yeah.
whatever. Not saying that literally per se. And then there's
Mhm.
the whole piece around how do you help yourself as a leader trying to help like because you're going to have your own
Yeah.
emotions and it takes a toll. And again, for anybody who, who's listening to us or watching us talk about this, like maybe we start there with like, what's your advice around the helping yourself as a leader, trying to lead other people through those very human, very emotional moments, and making sure that as best you can,
Yeah.
you're not sucked into it or bogged down by it or exhausted by because I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
burnout. Anyway,
I
there's a
think for me, the most important thing has been knowing myself, and knowing what my values are
lot.
and sticking to those.
Yeah, that's
I have what I like to call a frame around myself, which is, and inside that are all the behaviors that I will, I will work to, the values that I will hold. And part of what I have to do is to make sure that nothing penetrates that. As I've said, every job that you leave, you're always going to be replaceable. Someone else will step in and do it. And there's never a hell of a lot you can take away from a job, apart from obviously reflection on
yeah.
your experience and things. But you can always leave with your integrity intact. You can leave knowing that you have done the right thing and you haven't violated your own code. So for me, that's number one, is making sure that you do that.
May
The
I
second one,
sec there? I just want to pause for just a sec there. That is so core. That is so important. This
absolutely,
bears repeating. And so figuring out what that is, where like would you just kind of say it's like where are you going to draw your line in the sand for yourself, right? Because I
yes.
how many people are exhausted or feeling really yucky about where they're at and what they're doing because maybe on a daily basis that framework they either aren't clear on their frame and therefore maybe that frame is getting intruded upon and that could would you say it's fair to say that that could be like an issue right there for a lot of
Yes,
leaders? They're just
and it can happen particularly in HR as well because, and I don't know whether this is quite so true in the States, but it certainly is over here. A lot of HR roles, you have an HR manager in an organization, and then you'll have your operations director, your finance director. So HR will, in the hierarchy, will quite often sit below those roles. Now, those roles, they're not people focused. Those roles are, again, they're finance, and they're run by people who understand the black and the white. You either get the goods out or you don't. Your ROI is
process
this
focused.
or it isn't.
Yeah.
And HR gets called in to help, but quite often HR gets called in when a problem has already arisen. So as soon as we go in, it's between at least some parties, there's combat mode going on.
Right.
Now, also because where we sit in the hierarchy, we sit below quite often the major decision makers in an organization. One of the problems that we'll hit, and I've encountered this on several occasions, is when, as I say, the cultural violations, the bad behavior, is the person we report into. And
Yeah.
then you have, the it's an extra complication because you're going, well, I know what the problem is. The problem is this person, but how do I deal with this person because they're my boss? And then you have the conflict between, well, if I don't have a job, and we know, with today's economy and rising prices globally, if you don't have a job and you don't have money, you're in real trouble.
Yes.
And you're your values as well. You look after your family if you're working. You've got your partner, your kids, whatever that you've got to pay for. So you've got loyalty to them, and it can make you at sometimes go, well, I wouldn't normally do this. I wouldn't normally endorse this decision. I'm going to do it so
But
I can maintain
yeah,
my financial stability.
yeah,
And you have to make a decision, I think, in HR at times, whether or not that's a line you're willing to cross.
right.
Because having a job, it's a temporary thing. We move to other jobs. There's other jobs out there,
Yeah,
but again, my core value is my integrity stays with me
yeah,
forever.
right.
So I cannot violate that. And I will admit, I have done and said things in businesses that have put me on a collision course, with my manager, have put me, in danger of my
Yeah.
role. But if it's the right thing to do,
Mm.
I've been asked to do illegal things. I've been asked to, it's the age-old question, and I call it the Jurassic Park moment. Just because you could doesn't mean that you should.
I love that.
Um,
Thank you. Yes, I've always loved that line from Jurassic Park.
yeah,
Just can doesn't mean yeah. And so
yeah,
I love what you're saying there, Alex, in that space of, really think about, I love what you're saying, like my integrity goes with me everywhere,
yeah,
like and it is a rock and a hard place for a lot of people when you're saying, what's on the line here? But,
mm,
how compromised do you want to be for, and what are you going to get for it? Knowing full well that something you said much earlier that I think always, is kind of ugly, but a truth nevertheless that must be spoken is you said earlier, and I agree, we're all replaceable.
yeah,
So are you going to compromise yourself and ultimately quite possibly get replaced anyway?
yeah,
Or do you want to kind of walk away a little more intact with yourself and your integrity? So getting that framework, getting really clear as a leader around what are those core values, that framework in which I do not want lines crossed. I'm not going to cross lines no matter who's asking me, or where is that. So I think that's
yeah,
huge, and I did want to stop and unpack that a little bit further because I think there's a
yeah,
lot of us who don't stop and think about that. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier too, like, yeah, we put our values up on the wall over there, and then of course half the time as a company we don't live by the values that we say
yeah,
we do. But taking it to that most granular level is, what are your personal
yeah,
core values? And by the way, how well do they match the stuff that might or might not be on the
exactly. Yeah,
wall?
yeah,
And when somebody wants you to cross that line, how is that handled? How does that even get handled because I think there's a lot of exhaustion for a lot of people in the world right now, because it's like things just aren't well aligned, and we're
mm,
not being able to keep necessarily the integrity and the authenticity. So I really just wanted to pause on that for a moment. And
yeah.
anyway, I
And
love
I agree. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems in the workplace today is that people aren't able to be authentic in their roles.
no.
But they don't want to leave the roles because just with the economy, the way the economy is, you need your finances. We've got for example, here in Australia, we have a very low unemployment rate at the moment, so finding a new job can be hard. And people are being forced into a position so they can live their everyday lives. They're having to compromise
Yeah.
their values. We're seeing rising levels of mental health problems here in Australia. I've actually just signed up to be a mentor for a program called Mentoring for Men in my local community, and I discovered that program has actually been asked by the Victorian Health Authority to ramp up, if it can, to ramp up its operations, because there isn't enough money in the actual medical system to help people in the area who have mental health issues.
Yeah.
So it's prevalent. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
it's huge. I mean, the mental health, I mean, God, that can be a whole other like series of conversations
yeah,
right around there. Absolutely. And and again, it's like, so, one of the things that we can do to lower the temperature and lower the threshold on some of these underpinnings, I think, of some of the mental health stressors can be like, let's really look at what are our core
yeah,
values. Are we living up to our core values? Do
mm,
we operate with integrity? What if I'm the boss who's the problem? The
yeah,
great news about that is you can also be part of the solution. That's
yes,
a wonderful thing.
well,
And then you were going to say the second, so the first thing was around your framework,
Yeah.
Getting really solid on what you stand for. What was the
Yeah.
next thing that you were gonna share?
The next thing is communicating to people that that's who you are.
Yeah.
Um, for me, one of the greatest troubles in a workplace is uncertainty. People don't know how other people are going to react, or they're not sure of what their job is. So
Sure.
again, part of people and culture's mission in an organization is to create that clarity for people. You know what your job does. You know how it feeds up through all of the KPIs, the critical success factors to the company, how it impacts the top line. If you have that clarity, then you can come in and you can do your job. If people around you are then open about what their frame is, how they operate, you can then operate with certainty with your personal relationships and stuff with them, and it's that creates a comfortable working environment for you. I've worked in environments where I have trusted everybody in my team, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It's really terrific. I've also worked in environments where you've had a team member who goes off and says things to other people they shouldn't, or will disclose information that should be kept confidential and private. And when you operate with somebody who you don't trust, it changes the entire dynamic of the team, because it inhibits it inhibits developing relationships. It inhibits how well you can do your job, and it's because of that uncertainty of, if I tell this person this, is the right thing going to be done, or am I going to have to solve another problem? So for me, create your frame, get out, tell people that's how you operate, create that trust, and build an area of certainty around yourself, so
Yeah.
people know they can come and talk to you, they know they can come and tell you stuff.
I love that. And
Again,
the mutuality of it that says, like, create that
yes,
space. So, and again, hey, back to an earlier point, you can do this on your team. It doesn't mean that, depending on what your role is and what the title next to your name is, as a leader, um, start with what is within your circle of control. So look at yourself and look at your team and say, okay, team, I'm allowed to do something different tomorrow than I've ever done before. And here's, something we should start talking about, and be the person who, maybe you're the one who starts creating that trusting, open, clarifying, safer space in
yeah,
your finance team, in your
yeah,
IT team, on your sales or marketing team, or whichever team, or your HR team for that matter. Any function anywhere. Start with yourself and start with your team.
yeah,
And I don't know, maybe that other department doesn't care and their leader doesn't, that's not on you. But you can, right? Start in your own little area and say, we're going to operate this way.
yeah,
And here's what's going to happen when somebody violates trust or steps out of the clarity, or,
yeah,
again, we're back to rules of the game. But
yeah.
I love that. And that's very doable. That's a very
Mm.
doable exercise, isn't it? To have yourself and your team members say, let's really have a conversation about what do we individually stand for. I mean, I always think it's a great exercise to talk about, your core values personally and professionally,
Yes,
which
yeah,
might not be the same things, right? I mean, sometimes your professional values might be a little different than what you care about in your
yeah,
personal life might be a little different, might not. But opening yourself up, and again, this is what I love about you connecting the dots the way you do, Alex, is like, and that opens a little vulnerability too, the willingness
yeah,
to share and say, hi, as your leader, I want you as my team to know and understand me a little bit better from this perspective. So I'm
yeah,
willing to go first and share with you guys, gals,
yeah,
and say,
yeah. Well, there was a business I started at, and just to introduce myself, I've got a number of courses and stuff that I've written, and one of them was just on personal resilience. So I went and delivered that, and whenever I deliver training, I tell a lot of stories about myself, and I went through the one about the first time I had a panic attack. Spoke about that, and several people came up to me after I delivered the training session, going, "My God, I can't believe you said that." That was just amazing to hear. And it was a couple of months later, but I was getting people coming into my office going, I'm experiencing what you did. I'm having this with conversations with my manager. I've got issues they're making me feel nervous and anxious, and I feel I can come and talk to you because you've spoken about this. So that vulnerability that I showed when I went in, some people looked at it as, oh, well, the HR guy is now admitting, he's got that, or that could be a problem. Whereas what in fact it did was people went, this guy's got integrity, he's honest, he's prepared to talk about this stuff, which means when we have a problem, we can go and talk to him about it. And for me, again, that's one of the essences of a people and culture role, is you have to have that connection with people.
Yeah.
You have to be a trusted confidant, because we were able to solve all of the problems that they had. I was able to take them through techniques and things that I'd learned from counseling and stuff that I'd done, and share that wisdom, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Give them the techniques to go and have the conversations. We talked about, setting the frame for themselves.
Yeah.
And they were able to then, they were able to go and resolve the conflict themselves. But had I not made myself vulnerable right at the beginning of my employment, they wouldn't have seen me as the sort of person they could come and have those conversations with.
Oh, I love that. Is just, I think that might be one of the biggest lessons out of our entire conversation here today, Alex. It's just that too often vulnerability is seen as a weakness, but it's actually a strength. And the fact is that your willingness to stick your neck out a little bit, trust that being open, honest, clear about who you are and what you stand for actually paid bigger dividends. You also were able to help some, people in the organization, which actually is better for the dang business, by the way.
Absolutely.
Because that person being able to come to you and say, I know that you can help me, and that I see you as somebody who helps me, as opposed to stuffing it down inside or taking a pile of extra sick days or God knows what else could go on. I think that's one of the most important things that we could share in this conversation here, is just that being open, telling your story from that perspective. Any of us can do that. And that willingness and ability to say, hey, because it's humanizing. And if there's nothing else, take the resources out of the HR thing, but put the human back in, right? Yes. Put the human back into the equation. So listen, we are going to have another conversation around this. Like I said early on, you and I could go on.
Oh, I've got so much more I can share on.
We will. But I love you have shared so many great things here in this conversation with me. And really, folks, take this to heart, what Alex is sharing. He really knows his stuff. And these are quick and easy wins that you can get just by putting more of the human into yourself as a human being in a leadership space. Alex, thank you so much for being on Nuggets with Sauce today. Thanks, everybody.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
Wonderful. Welcome to Nuggets with Sauce, the podcast dishing up golden nuggets of wisdom and insight you can really sink your teeth into. I'm your host, Michelle Arntz. My guests and I serve up a saucy take on common business challenges here that feeds your hunger for knowledge and thought leadership. So let's dig in. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Nuggets with Sauce. I hope we fed your appetite for insights and information on how to improve your business. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never go hungry for more valuable thought leadership.